a long night on Capitol Hill. Senate Democrats hosting an all-night talkathon, not on the crisis in Ukraine or unemployment. Instead, they have decided to take to the floor in the Senate House, which they dominate, and talk a lot about global warming.
We have the ability now to reduce our reliance on oil and other fossil fuels, increase our production of clean energy, and create good-paying jobs that can never be outsourced.
It is critical that we leave our children and grandchildren a sustainable planet with a promising, bright future.
If you went to 100 doctors and 98 of them said you were sick and should take medicine, but 2 told you you were fine and should do nothing, what would you do? Climate change's deniers need to wake up.
All right, Rich Lowry, editor of the National Review and a Fox News contributor, and Bob Beckel, former Democratic campaign manager and co-host of The Five, here on the Fox News channel. So I don't get this. They're in the House, in the Senate rather, which is dominated by Democrats. Usually a filibuster is something that you do to try to sort of talk the other side down. And there's preaching to the choir, Bob, and there's no legislation at stake.
Yeah, there's no legislation, and interestingly enough, there were 3 or 4 Democrats who didn't show up, and by the way, they're from energy states, so which I understand.
But what does that prove? There's no legislation. There's nothing at stake.
Well, first of all, you know, a lot of us take it quite seriously as an issue, but beyond that, there are some people who believe that it'll be an election issue. I would, for one, do not believe that, but there are people who believe it will be. I mean, particularly in California, where the drought is severe, and they attribute it to global warming, and you know whether that's
Bob,
could be scientifically proven.
I got to get your reaction to this central point here, which is that there is no legislation. They're not pushing a vote on anything. So what are they doing?
Well, you know, there was legislation that was passed in the House about 2 or 3 years ago, and then it failed in the Senate, and so
on cap and trade.
Cap and trade, right? And I think what they want to do is revive a bill, and Boxer's the head of the committee that does that. My guess is she'll come out with something. They'll have another debate on it. They'll vote on it. They won't get enough votes to overcome a filibuster, and it'll die. But they want to keep the issue alive, and I don't frankly blame them for wanting to keep the issue alive. But otherwise, what are you going to talk about? National Flower Week? I mean, nobody's doing anything up there.
Well, what do you think's the motivation here, Rich?
Well, they easily, Harry Reid, they control the Senate. They could have gotten something through committee easily, and they could have had a Senate vote. That could have been their big demonstration, but it would have been horrible and poisonous politics for red state Democrats who are at threat in the Senate races this year. And the last time they brought this up, a year or so ago, they lost 13 Democrats. So this issue is a loser for them. So that's why you try to appease the base by talking, but by not actually doing anything that's going to hurt any of your vulnerable senators.
You know, you look at some of the major issues that we're dealing with right now, and I know that you feel strongly about global warming and that you feel it's an important issue. The only reason I'm going at it is because I don't understand why they're not actually having the guts to put out legislation there and to vote on it and to see what happens from it. But a lot of people would say, look, we're dealing with a very serious situation with Russia right now. We've got, a labor participation rate that is the lowest that it's been in 30 years. And you've got this health care issue, which now a lot of Democrats claim needs to be fixed. So why not stay up all night and talk about that?
Well, they formed something called the Global Climate Task Force. There's a task force for everything.
Oh, a task force. That's exciting.
And headed by Boxer and Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island. And so in order to kick that off, they decided they would have this talkathon. I'm not quite sure I understand the politics behind it, but I understand certainly the issue is something that bothers people. But I think that it's probably not what people would expect to see a senator stay up all night. We've had an example of this with Ted Cruz doing this on Obamacare. And even though a lot of people care about Obamacare, a lot of them thought it laughed him off the floor. Well, he stayed for 27 hours. But so I don't think that they're going to get a whole lot of mileage out of this.
It's not just the politics, though, Bob, that doesn't make any sense. It's the substance.
No,
because we have been flat on carbon emissions recently, largely because of the natural gas revolution. It's China and India that are driving this. About 35 gigatons of carbon going into the atmosphere every year. We're at less than 6 of that. We could eliminate all our carbon tomorrow and immediately be made up by others.
Yeah.
So if they really are worried so much about this, they should go on a tour. They should go on a long trip to China and India and tour those countries and say, you guys should shut down all your coal
pressure on
plants,
them.
and they'll get nowhere on it because they're not going to hurt their economic growth. They're not that
40 billion tons
stupid.
of carbon dioxide every year put into the atmosphere by the United States. And yes, you're right. China and India are in these developing nations. They've came to the stage late. They won't sign the protocols, except that George Bush signed the Copenhagen Agreement, which said that we will not allow the climate to increase 2 percentage points, and if it does, that's catastrophic, and we have to do catastrophic.
It's beyond our power, Bob. We don't control this. It's a global phenomenon.
Well,
It's a big
167
problem. So we
countries
can
signed
do
up.
whatever we want here and hurt our own economy and hurt our manufacturing and send it overseas. But China and India aren't that stupid, and they're not going to do the same.
But
So
is
we
that-
are powerless to do anything about this.
Is that an
even
argument
if you
to-
think it's a serious problem.
Is that an argument to put poisons in the air because the other guy won't do it?
They're not
Rich has
poisons.
send a congressional
That's
delegation to
absurd.
China and India and make a big, stink about it where maybe
My
it
guess
matters
is they
most.
won't get much treadway.
They're not getting a whole lot here either.
Well, I think the American public is not keyed into global warming, but the reality is that it's real, and I think it's going to a long-term. But trying to sell a long-term issue to people in this country, they're into short-term, immediate issues.
Well, it's not just you have to sell it here, and then you have to sell it to China.
I
And the fact
understand
is,
that.
over the
I
last
understand that.
15 years, global warming has plateaued. At the same time, we pump more and more carbon into the atmosphere. So there's a lot about this we don't understand.
Well, there's
gotta
one
go,
thing that we
guys.
could do is natural gas, which we have more of than anybody else. If we were to put an infrastructure in
Bingo.
and use it, we'd be better
We
off.
get a lot of agreement on that one. Bob and Rich, thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much.
Bob, we'll see you tonight.
Yes,
Thanks,
indeed.
guys.